Hey everybody, Monday evening weather for Weather Geeks time here on the first day of July 2019. Hope you had a good weekend. Today was certainly a spectacular day weather-wise. Before we get to this week's weather, since it is July 1st and we're now halfway through the year, I thought I'd start with a little review of where we've been during the first half of the year. We've had a lot of weather to talk about since the first of the year, that is for sure. This is kind of my top 5 big weather stories for the first half of 2019. Back on January 8th, we had a very rare midwinter tornado across parts of Trumbull County around the Cortland area. The coldest of the winter weather, nothing crazy unusual. We didn't have a rash of records or anything, but it was pretty darn cold for a few days at the end of January and up through about February 1st. The rest of winter was not that cold, although we did have a chilly March after a fairly mild February. Of course, the spring was characterized by a fair amount of rain in terms of the actual amounts, but even more so for a lot of people, at least in the early part of spring, it was just the number of days in which it at least rained a little. The amounts weren't crazy high, but it just wanted to rain a little bit almost every day back in the early to mid-spring. Late in the spring and early this summer, the amounts of rain became the story. We had a lot of flooding problems, of course. Towards the end of May and into June, rashes of severe weather. We've had plenty of wind damage and a couple of tornadoes over the last 5 or 6 weeks. All right, June finished in 4th place on the list of wettest Junes on record with 8.15 at the airport. The flooding rains that we had on Saturday in parts of Mahoning County missed a good chunk of Trumbull County, especially up towards the airport, so we did not pick up additional rain over the weekend. So 2019 finishes in 4th place. Notice again, I've showed this graphic a lot of times. Look at all the recent years. 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, all on this list. 2016, the only recent year that does not appear on this list. We've had some very wet Junes over the last decade. All right, we're heading into the heart of meteorological summer, of course. The month of July is when our averages peak on the high temperature end and the low temperature end as well. Our average highs peak at 82 for a couple of weeks during the middle of the month before very, very slowly declining a little bit in August. Of course, that decline becomes much more rapid as we get into meteorological fall in September. What about this July? I'm not expecting this July to go into the record books as some sort of unusually warm or cool month. It would surprise me, especially if we had an unusually cool month. I do think that, it's hard to bet against warmth these days around here, and if I were a betting man, I would say we end up near average to maybe even slightly above average, even though in the Climate Prediction Center outlook here, the blue just barely gets into us. That means there's a, kind of a low chance of cooler than average. The highest odds for warmer than average down in the southeast and along the west coast. As far as wet weather, we could use a break from the rain, that is for sure. It's starting to get a little bit better, a little bit drier out there, even though we've had some downpours in some spots over the last few days, and we're going to have downpours later this week and into the weekend. But overall, July should not be as wet as June. That's not saying much, considering we had 8 to 12 or 13 inches of rain across the area in June. But July should not be as extreme, although climatologically speaking, July is our wettest month of the year. We can thank heavy summertime thunderstorms for that reason. All right, when we look at starting in July through the end of the year, the warming over the last 30 years has been more kind of muted from July through November. The warming has definitely been more noticeable from December through June. But starting in July, the trends over the last 30 years have not been as extreme as earlier on in the year. So July in recent years has not changed that much in the temperature department, and we could say the same for August, September, and October and November as well. All right, on this first evening of July across the country, a few threats for severe weather across the northern Rockies and out across the upper Midwest up towards Minnesota, northern Iowa as well. Weather's quiet here at home. Our big story is about to become the humidity once again. This 2-day break from the summertime heat and humidity yesterday and today, it's about to come to a screeching halt thanks to these high dew points pushing in. As we go into late tonight and especially into tomorrow, it's going to feel like South Florida again starting tomorrow, and we're really taking us right through the holiday weekend. So this warm front pushes through. We'll get into the upper 80s tomorrow with a noticeable increase in those dew points. Now, as far as the rain goes, I think a lot of the day is dry. It's towards evening that we have an increased chance of some thunderstorms, and what we'll be keeping an eye on is this initial round that'll be kind of spotty, hit or miss and random, and then perhaps a more well-organized band that might try to form somewhere to our north and west, maybe over Lake Erie. Some of the models are kind of picking up on that. Our latest in-house model here kind of shows that idea. Don't take this as gospel, but maybe somewhere in northwest Ohio, southern Michigan, somewhere over Lake Erie, there might be a more organized bow of thunderstorms tomorrow night. If that were to come to fruition, we'd have to keep a very close eye on that. By the way, this is this week on the 4th of July. It's the 50-year anniversary of one of the biggest derechos and most memorable because it occurred on a holiday in Ohio history back in 1969 on July 4th. Numerous fatalities, and winds up to 100 miles per hour with a derecho that pushed across the state right on the holiday. Ruined a lot of 4th of July plans and caused a lot of damage and unfortunately some fatalities this week back in 1969. Now, not expecting a repeat of that tomorrow night, but again, we'll be keeping a close eye on the trends for tomorrow night. The Storm Prediction Center does have a low-end risk of severe weather in eastern Ohio and western PA for tomorrow into tomorrow night, and then it's kind of a copy and paste forecast for the rest of the week. I mean, just textbook midsummer stuff here. Heat, humidity, and randomly placed, slow-moving gully washers that could interrupt your outdoor plans at times. Wednesday, here's the 4th of July on Thursday. This front will be the separator between the real soup and just a gorgeous holiday up across New England. Low humidity and dry weather up there, but we'll be in the soup down here, and it's going to be pretty steamy. Heat index values, these numbers might even be a little conservative, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if we had some heat index values of 90 to 95 Thursday, Friday, and on Saturday. We had higher heat index values during the hottest times last year, but this is still, for sensitive people, the young, the old, pets, that can be a big deal. Part of the problem with thunderstorms later this week is they're going to be slow movers. There's very little wind in the lower levels of the atmosphere later this week as an upper level ridge parks over us. So from the ground up to about 5,000, even 10,000 feet, the winds will generally be under 10 to 20 miles per hour. And so as these things bubble up, they're just going to very slowly snake around. And, you know, that's not what we want to see, considering how sensitive we are to flooding lately. That'll be the case. That'll be the nature of these thunderstorms all the way through at least the first half of the weekend. Well, it's a 4-day weekend for many. So all the way through Saturday, perhaps even on Sunday. Just not much wind to steer these things along. So it's going to be one of the situations where if you're out on a lake celebrating the 4th, if you're doing anything outdoors, picnic, you name it, barbecue, just stay weather aware because you might have to avoid these a few times for Thursday, for Friday, for Saturday, and for Sunday as well. Now, none of these days will be a washout. Most of the mornings should be okay. It's really starting around lunchtime and taking us into the afternoon that these storms would be at their most numerous. So we've got our weather challenges ahead of us if we have outdoor plans later this week, but we have to also prepare for the heat and the humidity. I think the relief from the heat does come maybe for a day or two early next week. Now, while I don't think July is going to be a very hot month in the grand scheme of things compared to average, the first week is going to be pretty hot. The most consistently hot weather is likely to be in the first week or so of July. We might have one more hot stretch middle of next week, say Wednesday, Thursday of next week, and then after that, it doesn't look that hot at all. So this is not going to last the whole month, but for most of the first 7-8 days of July, yeah, looking pretty steamy across our area. All right, thanks for checking out tonight's Weather for Weather Geeks. I'll see you back here same time, same place on Tuesday.